the people that make the Agribusiness and Countryside Development Foundation happen. If we may give our sincerest gratitude to all of the members. Great thanks to all of our members, our partner institutions, special partner institutions, senior special partner institutions, corporate members, and individual members, without whom we would not be here today to bring you our weekly sessions for agribusiness and countryside development. Our foundation is a nonprofit, member-supported organization, and it is through your generosity and support that we are able to bring you all of these knowledge sessions every week. So good morning to everyone. I am the, well, now president, although we just had our board meeting. The official announcement hasn't come out yet. Julius Barcelona, it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning. It's nice to see everyone here bright and early. For those of you who are joining us 2 weeks later through our social media, it's very nice to see you wherever in the world you are. And we're very happy to have you with us this day in our session with Waves to Water of the Philippines. And if you are interested in accessing our network of agribusiness and countryside development organizations and professionals, or perhaps joining us for our informal sessions where we engage with our speaker in a more casual discussion of what they do, please consider joining us as a member. Our links are in the description. You can send us an email to introduce yourself, and we'd be very happy to have you on board. There we go. Okay. So today's session is for Waves for the Water Philippines. Waves for the Water is a, well, based on what I've found out about them, is a targeted special ops style nonprofit organization where they focus on correcting imbalances of water scarcity in developing communities around the world. So they've, over the past 10 years, already implemented 155 clean water programs in 48 countries, using water filtration systems, wells, rainwater harvesting systems. So this morning we have their operations director, Ms. Sam Coronado. She's a member of the faculty of the John Gokongwei School of Management. She's a graduate of Sociology from the University of the Philippines and has an MBA from the Salle University. Her experience includes a decade of development work covering corporate social responsibility, social enterprise, cooperatives, and other non-profit organizations in health, environment, women empowerment, micro, small, medium enterprise development. And well, I'm actually not sure what W.A.S.H is. You might want to explain that for us, Sam. Okay, but yeah, Waves for Water is tackling a very, very serious concern, which is also a concern that's very close to my heart. Sam, I'd like to ask, up to what time can you stay with us today? Because we do have our informal session after this.
I could stay maybe until 9 a.m. so that we have time for questions, if anything. Is that okay?
Sure.
At most.
All right, thanks very much for that. Yeah, so we usually like to ask our speakers before you dive into your presentation to just give us a bit about yourself, like what led to this decade of work with nonprofits, what led to, tell us a bit more about yourself so that we get to know you a little bit better. Okay, so without further ado, thanks very much to everyone for joining us, and I turn our floor over to Sam Coronado of Waves for Water PH. Sam, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julius. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Sam. You could call me Sam, Operations Director of Waves for Water Philippines. I'm a development worker, meaning I work in the sectors of WA.S.H. By the way, WA.S.H. means water, sanitation, and hygiene. It's a term in the development sector addressing those needs. So usually water is linked, of course, to different problems such as health, etc., which I'll dive into in my presentation. So just a background about me. Yes, I do teach part-time in the Ateneo. I've been to all 3 schools, weird enough. And then, yeah, I've working in the development sector has always been close to my heart. It's the kind of work that I like doing. And especially something as essential as water. So for most of us, maybe not everyone here, if you live in the city, the water usually is accessible by a twist of a hand, right? Right inside your homes. But that's really not the reality. If you just move a bit far away from the city, or even actually in the marginalized communities in the city, it still exists as a problem, even though we have water concessionaires, for example, in Metro Manila. So I won't take too long. I will share my screen so you could view my presentation. Right. Okay, so you guys could see my screen, right?
Yep,
Okay.
we're good.
Okay, so Waves for Water, again, is a WA.S.H nonprofit organization. WA.S.H stands for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. We've been in the Philippines since 2013, so we're actually celebrating our 10th year anniversary this year. But we are an international organization, so we are present in other countries as well. So as you know, of course, especially being in the agriculture sector, perhaps you are one of the most relevant sectors who feel the water shortages or even the droughts, the typhoons, the effects of climate change. And as you can see here, it is really felt in water, especially in the Philippines. So our country remains to be one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to the effects of intensifying effects of climate change, such as droughts, typhoons, which result to landslides, etc. It could actually coincide. We heard that we could experience El Nino until December, but at the same time, as mentioned weeks ago, maybe in the first week of August, we experienced typhoon like Typhoon Egay, Goring, and also Hana. So those are actually one of the typhoons that we actually respond to. And it's strange that these two extremes could coincide in a single country. And we could expect, of course, the intensifying effects of climate change through the years. And it's something that we should be preparing for, because especially if our livelihood depends on in the land, right, or even in the environment, if we become vulnerable or remain vulnerable in the effects of climate change, then our livelihoods and our lives would be affected. So climate change is felt in water. And at the same time, water is related to multiple UN SDGs. So I'm sure you guys have seen this before, right? So the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So clean water and sanitation is under number 6, right? But we could connect water into most, if not all, of these goals. So I'll just go through the top 5. So for example, poverty, right? So the UN actually separates what poverty is versus extreme poverty. So there's poverty, there's also extreme poverty, and two of the indicators of extreme poverty is lack of access to water and sanitation facilities. So you can't consider yourself as not poor or above the poverty line if you don't have toilets that are accessible, if you don't have water that is potable, that's easily accessible to you. So if you don't have those access, you could be considered as extremely poor. So it is, of course, intertwined with that access to clean water and sanitation. Next is zero hunger. So hunger, we often think about hunger as something to eat, right? But of course, we need water also to nourish ourselves to ensure that our body would absorb the nutrients that we have. So whenever we cook, we just think about the food, but of course we use water to clean the vegetables that we have, to put water in our rice, right? So if the quality of that water isn't good, then of course your nutrition itself, or the absorption of those nutrition, would be affected as well. And at the same time, of course, we could live up to maybe 40 days without food, but we could only live up to 3 days without clean water, right? So it's very essential and vital to our way of living. And if we don't see that approach, then we are seeing hunger in an incomplete picture. Also, water is related to good health and well-being because, of course, especially in the Philippines, we are a washer culture compared to a wiper culture. So washer culture means, for example, in toilets, we prefer bidets, right? So having a bidet, maybe a tabo of water for our hygiene, whereas in other countries, maybe European countries, they would be fine with toilet paper. So we are a washer culture, so water is very integral to our culture, and as such, when it comes to our hygiene approach, how we maintain our health, water is very essential. So of course, if you consume water that is not clean, it would affect you on a physical level. And at the same time, water is also related to some waterborne illnesses, especially if it's not clean and accessible. So it's difficult to imagine health without imagining or having clean water at the same. So of course, especially just consider if you don't have clean water around, what will you use for bathing and even drinking, right? Quality education. So what's the link between water and education? So in the Philippines, of course, and also tied to gender equality, women and children tend to carry the burden of providing water for their families. So typically, for example, in a poor household, the father would be working in the farm or construction sites, and then the women, the mothers, and their children as well are tasked to fetch water from wherever it is. So if it takes like a 2-hour hike, maybe a 2-hour wait in the lines, of course, instead of studying, those students would have to spend time just waiting for water or fetching water and expending their physical energy for water that they don't have much left already for schooling, for studying, for play even, which is part of their rights as well as children. At the same time, education is also linked to our hygiene practices. So sometimes we have different, what they call this, practices, cultural practices when it comes to hygiene that are not necessarily the best source. So for example, did you know that in the Philippines, at least, it's very common when you brush your teeth, right? You bumog, diba? You rinse the water of your mouth, rinse the toothpaste out of your mouth. But the practice should really be just spit out the toothpaste because it should stay in your mouth for the fluoride, right? So these are different practices that would need education in order to facilitate behavior change. And lastly, at least in this discussion, gender equality. So as mentioned, women carry the burden of providing water for their family. And if they spend so much time, similar with children, instead of just spending those time in their livelihood, maybe they are micro entrepreneurs, right? If they have small businesses, instead of spending their time for those livelihoods, for bettering themselves, for self-development, women would need to spend more time just fetching water. So it really becomes a cycle of poverty in a way, and just lack of time for self-development and to what they call this uplift themselves from poverty. So again, as mentioned, we could link it here to all of this, but in the interest of time, we won't. So globally, in terms of the data, 1 in 4 people do not have access to safe drinking water. So the communities that we work in usually look like this. So on the right side, you could see the chieftain of an indigenous people's community, showing us there's a pipe beneath his legs, and then there's a pipe going down to the community. So from the upstream source of water, it goes down to their community. So this is what it looks like below. So the indigenous people's community would use the water for cleaning, washing, and unfortunately also for drinking without any treatment or filtration. So in the Philippines, 1 in 10 people still do not have access to improved water sources, and it would look like this. So this is one of the realities nationwide. So water, again, is linked to health. And we find also that there is a rise in waterborne illnesses during times of typhoon. So it's interlinked that way. So of course, what happens to water when there's a typhoon, right? It becomes turbid, becomes mixed with soil, trash, etc. And if people are in dire situations where they don't have access to water and they would drink it directly, right, during times of emergency, then it would lead to a rise also in waterborne illnesses. So one of the top leading causes of death is still diarrhea, which is unfortunate because it could have been prevented through access to clean water. So how do we identify needs? When we source for communities, we look for the following indicators. So condition of their water source, severity of waterborne illnesses, if there has been like a recent outbreak of diarrhea, cholera, etc. Disaster vulnerability, if they have a history of being affected by typhoons or landslides or earthquakes. Presence of a community champion, very important. So whenever we come up with solutions, we just don't come up with that from an office. Of course, we come up with solutions in collaboration with the community. And if they don't have a buy-in, if there's no one advocating for that community, if they don't think they need the water, then it's very hard to implement or do any project in those types of communities. As they say, diba, you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So in that sense also, we could provide solutions, but if they don't want to take it on, if they don't see the importance, then it's very hard to make the project sustainable. Average amount of money spent on buying water. So this really depends. If they buy mineral water, like the ones in basho, in the blue containers, blue jerry cans, how much is that? So it would depend depending on where you are in the Philippines. And of course, the size of the community in terms of number of households. So in terms of our history at Waves for Water, so we were founded by John Rose. He was a professional surfer. So that's why it's called Waves for Water, because he used surfing competitions to raise funds for water filtration systems. So in 2009, during the Sumatra earthquake, he happened to be in Indonesia with a couple of filters with him. And he saw the impact of immediate response to those communities who were affected by the earthquake and are in need of water. So by now, since 2009, again, this is worldwide, we've implemented in 48 countries. But we don't have presence in all of those 48 countries. Sometimes we deploy ad hoc. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, as mentioned, we were founded in November 2013, which is actually Typhoon Haiyan or Typhoon Yolanda. So pareho kami ng anniversary ng Typhoon Yolanda in November 2013. So we'll be celebrating our 10th year anniversary then. One of the things that we try to promote is this do what you love, help along the way, meaning whoever is, anyone could be of help. So for example, if you are interested in different areas, for example, you guys are in the agriculture sector, just being in those sector, you don't need to be a non-profit organization or be in the WASH sector to help, right? So every one of us, regardless of profession or passion, could help in terms of the water situation in the Philippines. So you don't really need to go out of your way. Through collaboration, we are able to just expand and deepen our impact. And of course, our goal is to get clean water to everyone who needs it, especially in the Philippines. So as mentioned, it's our 10th year anniversary. We had a campaign from April to July where we implemented to the remaining provinces that we haven't piloted before. So by now we've piloted or we've implemented in all 82 provinces in the Philippines. And again, we do this through collaboration. So we're a very small team, by the way. We're a team of 7, very small team. But of course, we leverage on partnerships, collaboration with different sectors and stakeholders to expand our reach. So we are able to reach 82 provinces through that. Our approach is help the helpers or capacity building because, as mentioned, community champions are most important for project sustainability because if there's no one advocating for the community, especially if it's the local government or maybe local NGOs, then it's difficult for the project to be sustainable. So we capacitate those community champions on how to manage the technology that we transfer. And then we also go back for monitoring and evaluation. So just some of our solutions. So we have clean water systems. We have rainwater harvesting, especially in places where the primary water source is very far. Sometimes the nearest source is what comes from the sky. We couple this with hygiene education because, again, this is linked to their health. And not included here are the pilot that we're making for sanitation or low-cost toilet solutions. So let's go through each. So for water filtration, so we deploy water filters which have a 1 million gallon capacity. These filters are gravity fed. Okay, I'll just show this. Okay. Gravity fed, meaning you don't need electricity because, again, during times of typhoon, these are one of the first things to go. It's long lasting. It could last for a minimum of 5 years. Again, we've been here for almost 10 years. And when we go back for monitoring evaluation, there is one of the first areas that we deployed in during Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, which still used the original filter. So it could really last up to 5 to 10 years, given proper maintenance and care, which we again teach to the community. So what it removes? So it removes the most common causes of waterborne illnesses. And it's been accredited by the FDA and the DOH. So this is an example. There. So from dirty water, right, from the bucket above to clean water to the glass of water below. So that's how it goes. So again, during times of typhoon, the water would look like the one in the bucket, right? Especially it becomes turbid, mixed with soil, etc. But the filter is able to clean that water and make it potable. Again, we also couple our our approach with hygiene education for health. We deploy these what we call happy taps. So these are portable hand washing solutions. So these are especially relevant for public schools because they have a WINS program or Wash in Schools program, which gives the DepEd gives them stars if they have a good ratio of student population to hand washing facilities. So of course, to augment their needs, it's of course difficult to create what they call this or construct hand washing stations. So this is a medium-term solution to help augment those needs because of course, sometimes there's a hand washing station, but there's no water coming out of the pipe. So that's really a reality in many public schools. So at least these are water efficient solutions that could save water, especially if it's very, not very abundant or scarce in the area. So it's water efficient, safe, and durable. And again, we teach kids on how to do proper hand washing, the importance of that, etc. As mentioned, this is the low-cost toilet solutions that we're piloting as well. Especially, again, water efficiency is very important, especially in areas that do not have access to water. Of course, if you have to compete between drinking the water and flushing it in the toilet, people would prioritize drinking it. So we have to make toilets more water efficient so that it doesn't require a lot of water to flush. And at the same time, of course, also one of the targets of the LGUs, local governments, is to reduce open defecation or eradicate open defecation, which is still a problem in many parts of the Philippines and actually in Metro Manila. That's also still a problem, open defecation. So these are what we're piloting for now and hoping we'll learn from that pilot and then expand or implement more projects. In terms of local impact, so these are not updated except for the provinces. So again, we've been to all 82 provinces. We're continuously implementing. Again, as a nonprofit, we really like putting face to the statistics or using storytelling. So we are active on Instagram and Facebook as well. So if you have those platforms, please feel free to follow us and follow our journey as we provide water to different parts of the Philippines. Again, this is really it's one way to advocate for water access, sanitation, and hygiene to use these platforms. We go back to the community after 6 months to 1 year to conduct impact measurement. So some of the indicators that we measure are filter utilization rates, waterborne illnesses, economic savings, maybe in terms of buying mineral water instead of buying those mineral water, or lessening of hospitalization or medicine bills. Productivity and time savings. Productivity and time savings. Wait, sorry. So we use a GIS app in order to do these surveys even in areas that are very remote. These are just examples of some of our responses. So disaster response, different types of disasters through the years. We have community development as well with our different partners. So in the rightmost photos in Bulacan and Tacloban, so these are examples of rainwater harvesting or rainwater catchments. So making use of rainwater for water filtration. But we still deploy the buckets with filters because it's just more portable that way. It's easily shared by households. So actually one filter or one bucket with filter could be shared by up to 5 households. So at least after using using the filter, they could pass it along to their neighbors and that they could use it so that they could take turns taking care of the filters in the long run. More implementations in different provinces in the Philippines. We also have a partnership with the military and volunteer groups, so that we could reach, again, the most remote areas that are not very acceptable, not very accessible. So example of that would be Mavulis Island, which is the topmost island in the Philippines. Tawi-Tawi, of course, the southernmost province in the Philippines. We've been this year, we've been to Pag-asa Island, which is located in the Spratlys Island. So can you just imagine, like there's no like local water districts yet in those areas, and of course no private sector who would prioritize that in the near future. So we have to make solutions for the people who are already there. So example is Pag-asa Island. We also earlier this year, we went around Busuanga in Coron, just kayaking, because that's one of the easiest way to reach those remote island communities. So using those kayaks for like 20 kilometers to reach those communities with the filters, etc. So really just leveraging on different partnerships so that we reach farther and more Filipinos. This is also very important to note. So we should, or at least just for everyone's learning, we should employ human rights-based approach to water. So it's easy for us to think of solutions again, but it's best to again think about the human rights-based approach. So available, of course, ideally water supply is sufficient and continuous. In many communities, of course, there's what they call this waiting line, or there's certain hours only of the day where water is available. So ideally, water would be more available 24/7 or as needed. Accessible. So again, water could be available, but sometimes it's not accessible for everyone. For example, this matters especially in conflict areas. If you are a woman who is menstruating and you are in a conflict area, for example, just imagine how difficult it would be to use the toilets outside of your home in the dark, right? So one of the things to make a human rights-based approach to water is to use accessibility. And again, be accessible to different types of people, such as PWDs, etc. Next is quality and safety, of course, is the topmost priority. The water must pass certain quality standards. So as mentioned, at Waves for Water, ours would pass the W.A.H and the FDAs. Acceptable, of course, taking into account social and cultural norms. So this is especially important in indigenous communities because they have their own beliefs about water. So just an example here, I mentioned the washer versus wiper culture, right? In the Philippines, of course, we use sit-down toilets, but if you've been to Malaysia or Indonesia, you would know about the squat toilets, right? So the sit toilets in the Philippines would just be more acceptable culturally. And this is important because if we don't consider acceptability, then we could end up with a very effective solution that people don't use. So that's the worst thing because that's also a waste in investment if it does the job, but it's not being used. So an example here also is aqua tabs, right? So if you're familiar with the aqua tabs, these are chlorine. You put it in water and then it cleans the water from your cup and then you could drink it. But again, it's not acceptable for some people because of the taste of chlorine, right? So if they don't use that because of the taste, then it's not going to be an effective solution. Another example, of course, is toilets. So for example, what are the colors of our toilets? Typically, it's white, it's made of ceramic, right? But if you put this in indigenous people's communities, like they find that they don't want to use the toilets because it's too clean, too pristine, which they find it difficult to accept that they have to poop in those very beautiful toilet seats, right? So it's not culturally, in a way, acceptable. So you have to tweak your solutions a bit in order for it to be more acceptable to them. And then lastly, affordability, of course. So if your solution is too expensive, then it's not going to be equitable or good for the community as well. So in terms of the statistics, according to the UN, it should not exceed 3% of the household income in terms of the cost. Because again, these are extremely poor people, and if they would have to spend so much money just to access these, then it's not effective. And by the way, we give the solutions for free for the communities. their counterpart is, of course, the maintenance and care for these technology transfers. Okay, no need for filter demonstration because it's difficult. And I'd like to end my presentation here. So I mentioned earlier that in the Philippines, 1 in 10 people still do not have access to improved water sources, but we also want to emphasize that 9 out of 10 of those Filipinos could help. And I hope all of us here have improved access to water sources and would be able to help those communities in the future. So thank you. That's most of my presentation.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation, Sam. It's really, as I mentioned earlier, it's a topic that's very close to my heart personally, and probably to many people who are here with us this morning. In our case, although we don't work with potable water, we do work with irrigation. So filtration systems are something that are very, very important. We find that a lot of people don't understand the importance of filtration, even just to get rid of solid particles in the water. It's a major task. So in any case, all right. So now we open the floor to questions. Sam can stay with us until 9. Yeah, that's correct. So for our formal session with our questions, our rules are the same. First, I'd like to ask people to draw your attention, if you're on computer, to the bottom of your screen. There should be a button that's a smiley face with a plus sign over here or over here that says reactions. If you click that, it will say raise hand. So if you click raise hand, you'll see, like in my case, I've got a little yellow hand above my face right now. If you're on your phone, if you're on Android or an iOS, it's either 3 horizontal lines or 3 dots. If you tap that, you should also see an option that says reactions. Tap that, and then you should see the option to raise your hand. So that should line you up so you can ask your question. If you are unable to find the option to raise your hand, I'm going to you can put your question in the chat box. Just type it in, and I will line you up for your questions. Failing all of that, I'm going to ask Bernie or Vivian to please help me out. If in case someone's trying to catch our attention, just let me know so that I can line them up for any questions that they have. Okay, so and also because Sam can only stay with us until 9 o'clock, if you're going to ask your question, if you could just give her a quick introduction of yourself before you ask your question, like who you are, what you do, maybe just a quick something about what you got from her presentation, and then you can ask your question. Okay, and then to give way to as many people as possible, I will prioritize people who haven't asked questions yet. So let's put ourselves to 1 question and then maybe a follow-up, but I will prioritize people who haven't asked, okay? All right, so with that, I actually already see Ernie has unmuted. Ernie Villaluna, perhaps you have a question you'd like to ask.
Yes, well, I've seen the pictures on the indigenous people outside, on the countryside. Can appreciate it, because I've operated many companies outside. But why don't you get in touch with, at the start, these are indigenous people. There is a government office, NCIP, there is the congressman, because when you look at all these municipalities and cities and all that, they have a water district, it's a big budget, yeah, it's in a big budget. But how come these are not distributed to the people in the countryside, Because in the mines, we made our own sand filters, to start with, And from there, we clarify it, and then we treat it in a chlorinator with sodium hypochlorite, We are conscious about this because we have a population of, some of them as small as maybe 3,000 people. But the others, in case on the mine side, we have 17,000 people. And we normally calculate this, on the basis of 90 gallons per day per head, on these things. But I'm just saying that why don't you go get into the local government, get to the DNR, get into the NCIP, because I've seen there, that it's a little bit crude. And we have plenty of water, actually, when you look at it. We have the rainy season. It's a matter of how do we save it? How do we put it in an area where we can, bakit, di ba? We have a lot of floods. You remember the one in Cagayan, di ba? When Magat released 6,000 cubic meter per second, you know. And we know very well na talagang flooded because I think the flow of Cagayan River is only about 2,600 cubic meter per second. You know? So these things is, I'm just wondering why, you know, you get these people to get the government to work for it. Thank you.
Okay,
Sam,
thank you.
before you answer,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
Ernie, I'd like to just introduce yourself to Sam, your name and your
Oh, my
organization.
name is Ernie Villaluna. I am with the Jaime B. Ompin Foundation and Jaime B. Ompin Microfinance Foundation. We have lighted several, at the villages already in the Cordilleras, you know, with solar lights. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Sam, sorry to
Okay,
interrupt. Yeah, go ahead.
sure. Thank you so much, Ernie. And actually, we have a pending partnership with JVOFI, actually. So if ever we might be seeing each other in the future. But yes, you're right, especially in the problem of water. It's very complex, especially in terms of the agencies that are working on it. As mentioned, there's the National Water Resource Board, there's the DILG who are in charge of the local water. There are private sectors, of course, especially in Manila, there's MWSS. In the local areas, there's the local water districts. In schools, there's DepEd, again, in the programs of WASH in schools, etc. So one of the challenges in terms of water is that there's a very fragmented approach when it comes to water. So before, I think the current president proposed that there's going to have a Department of Water or essential agency to take care of the water situation all over the Philippines, because in Metro Manila, as mentioned, we have most of our problems solved, but not all. But in areas just outside of Metro Manila, it's still a problem. So just an example here, in Tanay Rizal, it's still serviced, of course, by Manila Water Company, still within the east zone of Metro Manila. But there are pockets of areas there that are not reached, and that's where we come in. Again, we try to prioritize communities that do not have access to clean water, or at least just have increased challenges. We know that these water filtration are medium-term solutions, right? So it's, of course, if we could have piped-in water source or level 3 water source, that's really the best solution. But that solution is going to take time. And again, multiple organizations collaborating on those things before it happens. But the need for water is already immediate. It's there already. And it's very important that we address this soon, because we know how important water is just on a daily basis. So we work with communities that are really challenged. We do work with the local government. So of course, we don't do this alone, even with the NCIP as well. Just in terms of our, what they call this, collaboration, again, community champion presence that would include local governments, local water districts, and also those indigenous peoples communities, or those who are advocating for those IP communities. So again, the water problem is very complex. It takes more than one organization to do it. And that's why we really emphasize collaboration and partnership in order to do that. But I really appreciate your question, because it really brings to light the differences or stark differences of areas, especially the cities versus the provinces, and of course, the more what they call this, more remote areas in the Philippines. So definitely collaboration is key in this problem, as complex as water. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ernie. Okay. Are there other questions from the audience? Just raise your hand, mute yourself, say hello. There is a question here in the chat box. Yeah, actually, from Ike. Yeah, very important. Thanks for reminding me, Ike. Sam, we actually, because we post our videos, these formal sessions online 2 weeks later, we actually do get some audience from other countries as well. Considering that Waves for Water is an international organization, would you be okay with sharing, for example, how people can communicate with you, how people can communicate with Waves for Water, so that people, even in other countries, maybe OFWs, might be interested in reaching out, Filipinos in other countries, and so on. Sam's posted here. If you could just dictate it, because the chat unfortunately doesn't come out.
Sure. Okay.
On-
So thank
yeah.
you. Yes, of course, we'd want to collaborate again with more people even outside of the Philippines. So you could reach us via me at least via sam@wavesforwater.org or philippines@wavesforwater.org. So again, we're also present on social media. If you have that, you could send us a private message as well. Waves for Water on Facebook and Waves for Water Philippines on Instagram.
Okay. Would you be okay with us putting the contact information in our video uploads? We'll put that
Sure,
in the
in the
description.
caption. Yes, feel free. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that. I see Ike's raised his hand. Ike, please.
Hello, hello, Sam. You mentioned you have a GIS platform. Is that GIS or
Yes.
GPS?
GIS,
Can you
Geographic
talk
Information System.
more about that?
Sure.
Via SMS? Is that via SMS?
No, via app. Okay.
Sino nag-i-input? Who is inputting the data?
Yes, so it's going to be us or volunteers or partner NGOs. So again, we are a very small team. Okay, I'll continue if that's okay. Okay. So again, we have this GIS app, Geographic Information System app, where you could use your phones to do the monitoring and evaluation. So again, we are a small team of 7. We don't do the M&E all by ourselves. Sometimes we would need help. So this is where volunteers would come in. Even local community champions could conduct this M&E. We train them, of course, beforehand about the questions, how to use the app. Again, this is something that you could use offline, especially in remote areas where you can't, all you need is your phone, if ever. And then we go house to house and see the filters face to face. So we actually take photos of the filters. So we don't just hear it from someone else, right? So we really test the filters also. So we put water in it, check for any defects or sorry, not defects, but anything missing in terms of parts in the filters. We check the flow rate. So flow rate is very important. I think Ernie also brought this up. So there are different types of filtration systems. Of course, it's not just one. Again, there are multiple solutions when it comes to water, sanitation, hygiene. Our chosen solution, the filters that we have, we choose it. One of the reasons why we chose it is because of the flow rate. So it's 1 minute per liter, 1 minute per liter, right? So it's quite fast because some could take up to 30 minutes per liter. And again, this is important, especially in communities in terms of time savings and using that other saved time for other purposes such as livelihood, education, etc. So we test the flow rate of the filters. We conduct retraining if needed. If they forgot, for example, how to maintain the filters, even after the capacity building, we conduct retraining. And then we ensure that before we leave, hopefully the filters are still working. And if it's not, we record it as well, what the reason why it was not working anymore. So we do this nationwide and even in other countries as well. Again, we leverage volunteers and we are transparent also with the results of those what they call this, those M&E trips. So sometimes again, the donors or the donating companies, right, for CSR, corporate social responsibility, they volunteer with us to do M&E of the areas that they donated to, for example. So at least they get to see firsthand what happened with the filters, if they're being used, what are the impacts, if any. So that's how we use that monitoring and evaluation tool.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Ike. All right. So do we have other questions from the audience? I see May has raised her hand. May, please.
Hi, Sam. Great presentation. Question, kasi we have this, one of our advocacies, of course, to help our ICA brothers and sisters. So, is it possible or how can we, buy the product? Is it to communicate with you and how much would be the cost?
Okay, thank you for that question. So we're also transparent about the cost. We're a nonprofit, so we don't really sell it. So for example, if you have any communities that are in need, we just would ask some basic information about that community, such as what are their primary water source, how many households, and other information that I could send you if ever. So we just ask for that information. And then in terms of each filter with buckets, so the filters itself, just the filters would cost 2,650. It is imported. It's not locally made, unfortunately. We don't have that technology yet in the local scene. Or at least it's not priced as cheaply, or maybe not as widely available. So those filters are at 2,650. Again, these filters could be attached to any kind of container. So we use the same for for example, rainwater catchment. There are different applications which I could show you in a bit. And if it comes with buckets, it's at 3,000. So again, you could purchase your own containers. If you would allow me to share screen, I could show the filter applications. Give me a minute. Okay. Okay, so let me just show you more detail about filter applications. So again, it could be shared by up to 5 households, the filter with buckets. So what happens is that they take turns filling their containers with water. And then usually if they have multiple containers, it could last up to a week for them. And they just rotate in terms of who would have access to that water system. So these communities, we train them again how to use them, so that if they forget, they could teach each other along the way how to maintain it, etc. in terms of capacity building. The water here is not used for the water in the filter. It just passes through the filter, right? So there's no need to store water in the buckets itself. It just passes through, and then it would be stored in a separate container. So we also teach them they should clean their containers, etc. Because maybe the water is clean, but the container isn't clean, then that would still not be clean. This is also an example where we could establish water depots. So there could be an elevation, certain elevation, because again, it's gravity fed, and the higher it is, the elevation would be, the faster the flow rate. The filters could be attached to hardware store-bought faucets, such as these, yung may mga screws sa dulo. So they could screw the filters directly, and the water that comes out there would be clean. So at least in terms of flow rate, again, this is faster kasi may pressure na siya. And yun, they could use the faucets as well for hand washing, etc., and other uses. So again, as mentioned, we still deploy the buckets. We like the buckets because it's just more portable, especially if the households are far from each other, right? So it's just more easily distributed that way. This has been implemented in Haiti during times of disaster. So like creating this stand made of metal, so that it could be more portable and also lightweight. Another example, again, you could attach multiple filters in one container. So this is just an example, right? Especially during times of disaster, you have a central location, like in the evacuation center. You have a tank there if you have a tank, and then you put multiple filters there so that it could serve more people. It could also be made as a hand washing station, and the water that comes out of that hand washing station could already be clean. So this is an example in a school, right? So you could put this in any public place. And some examples again of rainwater catchment tanks. So we deploy this in a mountain community. So we just need to construct the platforms, of course, and find the land or area where we could construct this as a central area. So again, working with the community also to provide or identify the place where we could establish these. And other examples, again, deploying both the water tanks and the filters at the same time. So again, connecting this to the roof, to the gutters, etc. So just at least something visual that you could take note of in terms of how the filters could be adapted to. So again, your question was about the price. So the filter itself is 2,650. If it comes with a bucket, There could be a logo there as well. It's going to be 3,000. And then if you purchase just the filters, again, you could have different applications, such as the examples given earlier. So there you go.
Okay, there are 3 questions left. I think we have enough time for those 3 questions. So we'll have Oscar, then Vicky, and then oh, okay, no, Sam just answered in the chat box. Okay, Oscar and then Bernie. Oscar, please come in.
Yeah, I'm Oscar Barrera. I'm from Phil Export and MFI Polytechnic. Regarding the system, I think the whole system should consist of rain gathering, you know, and then the filters and etc. So let's say for a typical family group of, let's say, 4 or 5 families, do you have an idea of a total cost of the rain gathering, let's say maybe from the rooftops of 4 or 5 houses, and then of course the filter system up to the final usage? Is that a package
Yep, thank you for that
that
question.
we could work on? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the rainwater catchment really would depend on the community's primary water source. So if their water source is a bit far, and then again, they are in a way prone to disasters, maybe that water could dry up, etc., or maybe could flood. Rainwater would be the best solution. But sometimes the primary water source would be surface water that's near, etc. In that sense, maybe they could get water directly from that surface water. So it really depends on where the primary water source is located. If it's very far, then of course we recommend the rainwater. If it's accessible relatively, then they could use that primary water source. So sometimes kasi they have community taps. So diba, maybe they don't have taps inside their homes, but they have taps in the street, maybe a few meters from their house. And then they could use that tap and then filter the water. So it depends on their water source. If wala talaga, then rainwater is good. The challenge is that rainwater catchments could be pricey. So it depends on the storage capacity. So we often deploy mga what do you call this, 1,000-liter para sulit kasi nga it's quite expensive, and again it entails some construction because you have to build the platform and also find the land to build it on the rainwater catchment. So we do this in collaboration with the local community if they have any areas to recommend where we could build it. And of course, availability of funds. So donors, if there's a donor for rainwater catchment, that's good. Again, the price of that at about 1,000-liter is about 50,000, including the platform. There could be variations in terms of construction cost in the area. So we build it, or we source the hardwares, the supplies, still within the community, or at least near the community, as near as the community as possible, to lessen the cost. So it's not like we're from Manila, we carry the water tanks and then go to, let's say, Kalinga, which we did recently actually. So what we do is we source the nearest hardware stores to find those supplies, construction materials, etc., and gauge the exact amounts there. But our estimate is around 50,000, including the platforms, the labor, etc., for 1,000-liter rainwater catchment. So there's just variation depending on the area in terms of the price. So I hope that answers your question.
Hey, thanks very much for that, Oscar. Ray, I'm really sorry. I don't think we have enough time for your question. Bernie, please come in.
Yeah, so my question is there a segregation in terms of water for potable use and, let us say, for agriculture and other livelihood?
Yes, of course, there's going to be a segregation. In terms of our solutions, it's really clean water. It's water for consumption or drinking. Irrigation, of course, it's a different use of water. It doesn't have to meet there are standards that we have to meet. Doesn't have to meet DOH standards or FDA standards or at most. But it would need different qualities. I guess the common problem of the two, of our water filtration and irrigation, is the water source itself. So especially in the Philippines, the water source is a problem. Again, we experience droughts, El Nino, and then there's typhoons at the same time. So the unpredictability of it, in a way, would affect the sustainability of both approaches. So that's why we leverage as much as possible the current water source. And if it's not possible, we use the rainwater if that is the closest or best water source that they could have. But of course, we can't filter water if there's no water itself. So I guess the same goes for irrigation. The water supply is a very important factor. So yeah, in terms of your question, the difference would be the water quality and safety standards. So ours, it would have to be safe for consumption.
Okay. All right. And with that, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time, Sam. And thank you very much for being with us. Myself, I'm very interested in talking to you and to Waves for Water because we do a lot of irrigation infrastructure. I'm very familiar with Sawyer filters. I go into the mountains quite often.
Yeah.
So it's a way to get clean water when you're out in the field. So it might be very easy for us to just include it in existing infrastructure that we've set up for irrigation systems so that farmers don't just have access to the irrigation water, but they can actually use those systems for, yeah, as long as there's no heavy metal contamination, of course. And of course, if they're diligent with backwashing. So, so before we close out our session, I hope you can stay with us just for a few more minutes. We'd like to first present our certificate of appreciation to Sam. All right, so the Agribusiness and Countryside Development Foundation, in partnership with the Management Association of the Philippines, together with all of our members, our partner institutions, special partner institutions, senior special partner institutions, corporate members, and individual members, all present the Certificate of Appreciation to Samantha Isabel V. Coronado-Antonio for her invaluable support in the advocacy and promotion of agribusiness and countryside development, and for commendable and unselfish services rendered to this foundation as our resource speaker on our 34th weekly online meeting, given this 12th day of September 2023 in Makati City. All right, signed myself and Ernie Ordonez. Okay, and before we go, I'd like to I think we have a topic for next week already. Can you just flash the social media card really quickly? Okay. All right. So we have a topic. Our topic for next week comes from the Lamak Multipurpose Cooperative, where they're going to talk about 7 agribusinesses. So that's always interesting to see. Cooperatives usually try to diversify, especially when they're very young, into as many different streams of revenue as possible. And it would definitely be interesting to see that from the perspective of a cooperative trying to set up here. Most likely one that's already very established. I think Lamak Multipurpose is already quite well established. So it would be great for us to see how this cooperative was able to develop all of their different revenue streams to agribusiness. And perhaps that might serve as an inspiration for our efforts as well for agribusiness and countryside development. Okay, and with that, maybe I can invite Sam just for one last minute to close us out. Maybe a few last words from you.
All right. Thank you everyone for having me today. And I enjoy also answering your questions. I hope this helped. Again, I guess my parting words would be, again, it really takes collaboration to solve anything. So there's no silver bullet for something as complex as water, and collaboration is very important. And I'm happy to be part of this talk and to meet you guys. Yeah, agriculture is of course very intertwined and very important and relevant also in terms of the water sector. So water and agriculture, of course. And yeah, thank you guys for having me and have a good rest of the day. Bye.
All right, and thank you very much, Sam. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Keep in touch.